Ed.
Yes, question to your panel there. On these leaked emails regarding this climate warming, don't you find it kind of interesting that mainstream media, especially in Canada, basically, from my understanding, look at the coverage, have basically avoided it? And I'm suggesting that if the reverse were true, if they hacked into the naysayers on climate change and found whatever, this would have been all over the paper.
Well, the last time I looked, I'm considered to be pretty mainstream, and I started my program with a half hour on it this morning.
Yeah, but Bill, you still never invited anybody on your show that really voices with any expertise the other side. And I find that despicable, absolutely despicable. You're entitled to your own opinion, but when you won't even, with your great interview skills, I'm sure you could break down his argument if he had one to lay in front of you. And why won't you?
Well, I actually asked my producers this morning to get in touch with Judith Curry, a climate scientist at Georgia Institute of Technology, and Gavin Schmidt, a NASA climatologist, and I think they have quite different points of view on these email exchanges.
Well, you know, in answer to the caller, I think the Canadian media were slow getting off the ground on this issue. But frankly, I've seen issues suppressed to a much greater degree than this one. I mean, the National Post has been filled with this stuff. The Globe and Mail had an article from the New York Times. And you see what I think that the anti-global warming constituency, which I think this caller probably represents, are trying to use the argument now that somehow the mainstream media are squelching this story. I don't think this story is squelched at all.
No, it's not.
No, and let's be honest, we've had several callers this morning who represent the global warming deniers crowd. I don't think that's the mainstream of Canadian thought or of scientific thought. Frankly, you could round up more scientists who believe that aliens have visited the planet than who believe that global warming is not happening. And so it's healthy that we have this debate. It's healthy that it all get reported in the press. But let's be honest, the overwhelming majority of scientific opinion is that global warming is happening, is a serious threat, especially in the developing world.
And I have told my producers if they can find a climatologist who has had recent peer-reviewed work published that denies climate change, I'd be happy to have them on the program.
See, Bill, that's part of the problem. One of the things that came out in these leaked emails is that these scientists, believe it or not, were conspiring to deny anti-global warming people access to peer-reviewed journals. That's one of the emails that comes out.
Although
I mean, they look just awful. But I think Monty's right, that as bad as it looks and as nefarious as their tactics were, it doesn't change the science.
That's right. Back with more of your calls, 604-280-9.
Live from Vancouver, this is The Bill Good Show. Here again is Bill Good.
With our Monday morning quarterbacks, Norman Spector and Monty Paulson, and I invite your calls to them, 604-280-9898. Bob, good morning.
Good morning. I'd like to echo some of the thoughts of your last caller. I believe the media in general has not given the other side, so-called other side of the climate change argument, any sort of fair hearing. Yes, Mr. Spector is correct, the Globe and Mail, National Post, but I think there's more to be said on this. And this.
Do you ever listen to Charles Adler?
Yes, I do.
Do you ever listen to Roy Green?
Oh, look, I'm not saying that there aren't people covering it. I'm just saying that there's not. I don't see it on your newscast. I don't see it on the other newscasts that are locally in the evening on television. I'm not here to argue. I'm just trying to present a point. I believe there's more to these emails. I think they should be discussed more. I agree with your point of view that you'd have someone on, and that's very fair. I'm just calling to say that, the great unwashed out there, it's not that they don't believe there's no climate change or global warming. It's the man-made cause where most of us have this argument. And I think there's some very, very important things that should be considered and looked at. And you made a point earlier today about the pine beetle. You asked your friend Mark Madriga. He will tell you that we've probably never, ever had the kind of cold climates X number of years in a row that it would require to kill the pine beetle. But there's a lot of things out there that people just don't bring forward. That's all I'd like to say.
Monty?
Well, I think it's kind of sad that the climate deniers have failed so miserably in bringing forward credible science that they now feel by overwhelming the lines at the Bill Good Show they can make their point. And more power to them. But I'd much rather see a healthy debate on the issues, as that last caller has said, rather than this attempt. That was our 5th caller in a row, and we have a few more in line of, simply calling the Bill Good Show or any other program and sort of trying to dominate the airwaves that way is not debate, it's bullying.
Norman, you were going to say something?
Well, I mean, you want to talk about bullying. I mean, even the use of the term deniers, the way these people have been disparaged over the years. I mean, the deniers, the allusion is to the Holocaust. That was where the term originated, and I think it's a sign of the quasi-fascist tactics.
Well, I actually stopped using the term once that was pointed out to me. I hadn't equated, perhaps because I'm just that much younger than you, hadn't equated it to that, but I understand it.
Yeah, and I think it was chosen by the people who chose it from that point of view, and I think it's to your credit that you stopped using it. But there has been a full court press by the global warming crowd. We've seen it here. We've been propagandized to an incredible extent, and the fight back has started now. Now, it doesn't really matter what happens here, and again, I think it's just it really matters what happens in the United States.
But I'm troubled by something you just said, Norman, the global warming crowd. That would seem to include virtually every government at the moment. Monty talked about the Queen's message, but while the Prime Minister is wanting to go slow on this, he's no longer suggesting climate change isn't real. John Baird, the former Environment Minister, was very strong on the topic. I don't see any political leader in Canada, whether it's Mr. Ignatieff or Mr. Layton, who suggests, I'm trying not to use the word deny, who suggests that climate change isn't a real, serious concern.
And I'm of that view as well. When I use the term global warming crowd, I mean the CBC turning over its broadcast to David Suzuki, or the Vancouver Sun turning over the editorship of its paper, which to me defies all journalistic standards, to David Suzuki. I mean, there has been a huge push on to increase the urgency, and frankly, to me, the only importance of these emails means that there's a lot of uncertainty out there, and we're being asked to make huge decisions which could devastate our country. And I'm not exaggerating. They could devastate Canada. We have a huge amount at stake here. And when you get things in the Globe and Mail to repeat that China is proposing to reduce its emissions, when in fact it's going to double them, I think that there's a big lie here. Now, again, I think the important thing is what goes on in the United States. I mean, Fox News is now on to this thing now, and you know what they do with issues, and you know how difficult. And look, it's not just the Republicans. The Democratic Party in the United States is just as divided. The Senate voted 95-0 during the Clinton years, telling Clinton that if he signed any agreement that didn't include China, not to bother submitting it for ratification.
But Norman, you keep reducing this to a question of politics and history, and we are talking about human lives here. If the overwhelming weight of the science is right, there's going to be serious sea level rise and serious crop failure across vast parts of the world unless we act quickly. So the pressure is not created by the CBC or the Globe and Mail. The pressure is created by science that says we're at a serious tipping point and we need to take it seriously. And again, hiding behind saying we're better than China isn't a real argument here.
Well, I think we have less, frankly, I think Stephen Harper's job is to protect Canadian interests, and I think Canada has a lot less to lose from global warming than China does.
So we should just go ahead and let global warming proceed because we're a northern nation?
No, but we shouldn't do more than our fair share and let them get away with doing nothing.
Back with more after this.